Britain voted yes to Brexit to take back control. 10 years later, it can't even keep a prime minister. Today, Prime Minister Keir Starmer resigned after just 2 years in office. His emotional goodbye, it also came on the eve of the 10th anniversary of Brexit. In June 2016, voters in the UK were asked, should Britain remain in the European Union or leave? Well, leave won by a narrow margin. A decade later, the numbers have reversed. The latest polls show that 52% of British voters would say that they would support rejoining the EU if they could. And apparently, they would be greeted with open arms. A new poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations finds that 66% of the people that polled across the EU say that they tend to support or strongly support UK membership. Now, in 2016, Brexit was sold as a way to take back control of borders, laws, money, and Britain's place in the world. But 10 years later, its political parties seem broken, voters are angry, and as of today, Prime Minister number 6 is out and 7 is apparently in the works. So did Brexit give Britain control, or did it trap it in a never-ending crisis? As some people are asking, did Brexit break Britain? Want to talk about that? I'm joined now by David Charter. He's the U.S. Assistant Editor with The Times newspaper. He has watched this story from almost every angle: Westminster, Brussels, Berlin, and now Washington, D.C. He has also written extensively about Britain's relationship with Europe. His books include Au revoir, Europe and Europe in or out. David was also a familiar face to our viewers during those heady days when the Brexit referendum took place. David, it's good to have you back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Brent. It's good to be with you.
So let me ask you at the start here, did Brexit break Britain?
I think there's no doubt that Brexit has not only worsened the economic outlook for Britain, and we've now got 10 years worth of figures showing that growth has been suppressed by Brexit difficulties, the decline in investment, for example, and the hit to the pound, which are being just two of the economic indicators. But also there's been a cultural and political hit that was almost, I think, unexpected at the time, that the wounds opened by the very divisive Brexit vote. You remember how close it was, have simply not healed. It may be the case now that there's a slight majority in favour of rejoining, but no government is going to put that to the country at the moment, because it's still very bitterly divided. Feelings are still running much stronger, I think, than anybody thought they would do 10 years after the vote. And it's added to the fragmentation of politics in Britain. We've seen the rise of new parties on left and right that have given more of a feeling of atrophy of politics than of the country taking control and come together.
You know, David, before we get to Keir Starmer and the political turmoil, if you could give us a brief reminder, what was Brexit supposed to do for the UK?
Well, the key catchphrase of vote leave and the people who ran the campaign to leave was to take back control. So it was to take back control of full economic power of the country. That meant not sending billions of pounds to Brussels, but having full control of that. It meant taking back control of borders, so being able to run the immigration system unilaterally in line with Britain's needs, rather than to have the free movement of EU workers and the ability of EU citizens to travel and work in the UK freely. And it also meant taking back control over a myriad regulations that governed the minutiae of much of British business life, from fishing, including fishing and farming and all sorts of other technical regulations. But the reality of taking back control has not been as simple and attractive, I think, as it sounded to many voters. And that's added to frustration out there, that there's a feeling that they were either misled, that it would be too easy, or that the British the British governments that have tried to take on this challenge have not been good enough and have failed.
Yeah. You bring up a very good point here. It's the politics that appears for many people to be the problem. 10 years after the referendum, Britain has had 6 prime ministers and is now headed towards another one. If we could, let's kind of walk through the prime ministers since Brexit. David Cameron, he called the Brexit referendum and lost. And then Theresa May, she could not deliver Brexit despite her mantra, Brexit means Brexit. Boris Johnson followed her. He promised to get Brexit done. He didn't. And then there was Liz Truss. She blew up market confidence. She was even compared to a head of lettuce. Then Rishi Sunak, he could not rescue the Conservatives, which meant he was followed by Keir Starmer, who won in what was labeled the loveless landslide. He promised calm, and now he is leaving too. Is Brexit, David, is the Brexit the thread, if you will, running through all of this?
Now, there's no doubt to me that Brexit has got a large role to play in this parade of prime ministers that you've talked about. Having said that, it's not unique in Europe. France has had 9 prime ministers since Brexit. So in defense of the UK, it's not an outlier in Europe, but it is unusual for Britain. We were used to those very long-serving prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, that gave a sense, whether you were for or against them, gave a sense of stability and direction to the country. This time it seemed to be stop-start. No one's been able to really get going and grasp the nettle. And now that was because the first prime minister after Brexit was a Remainer, essentially, Theresa May, who was trying to meet expectations from the Brexiteers, who eventually got what they wanted, which was the guy, Boris Johnson, who led the charge to leave the EU. But even Boris Johnson couldn't corral opinion behind what Brexit really meant and which particular direction it should go in, how tough they should be in completely leaving the EU, where half of Britain's exports still go. And of course, along came the COVID pandemic and made everything much harder.
And David, if we've got people watching who were, let's say, teenagers or students when Brexit happened, how do you explain this to them? I mean, they would ask, how did one referendum become a decade of instability? I mean, how would you answer that?
Well, it looks to me now, looking back over that decade, that we underestimated just how deeply people would feel about this. It was seen almost at the time as a free hit against the government. You can say that you like the government's policies or you don't like the government's policies in a referendum. Perhaps some people didn't take it that seriously. I mean, obviously, a lot of people did. And there were very strong feelings on both sides. But once this Pandora's box was opened, it's been impossible to close. And the wounds that were caused on both sides, the feeling of upset by the people who wanted to remain in Europe, losing those benefits of being in the single market and the customs union. And on the other side, the grievances of Brexit voters who wanted to send a message about mass immigration. Neither of them have been satisfied. In fact, both sides feel more aggrieved now than ever.
Would you say, David, was Brexit maybe also a symptom of something deeper, weak growth, broken public services, distrust of elites and voters who no longer believed either major party? I mean, was all of this being, I guess, manifest through Brexit?
I think there's an aspect of that. When you have a big national referendum, we don't have them very often in Britain. It's not a common part of British life. So there was a feeling that this might solve a lot of problems. And everybody had their own thoughts about which problems it might solve. Well, it was impossible, of course, for a government to come along and satisfy everybody in that case. Some people voted for Brexit because they were upset with immigration. Some people voted for it because the jobs were being outsourced around the world, and the nature of the global economy was changing. Some people didn't vote for it because they think that the EU should be much closer together and more like a federal nation almost. And this great diversity of feeling, it wasn't people's top issue coming into that period. But as I say, this box of grievances and feelings having been opened, it's been very difficult for British prime ministers to satisfy almost anybody on it, because inevitably you get the compromises of day-to-day politics. One of the great ironies of it was that the party, which was a small party really, the UK Independence Party led by Nigel Farage, which long championed Brexit, has now morphed into a nationalist party called Reform, which has picked up a lot of the disgruntled voters who felt that Brexit and the prime ministers we've had over this period have let them down. And this has caused actually a growth in British nationalism that could lead Nigel Farage to Downing Street in a few years' time if things continue as they are.
Well, David, you say that, but Keir Starmer, he came into office, his whole pitch was competence. You need someone who's qualified, no more circuses, no permanent emergency. You need someone who's going to be there to get the job done. Why was that not enough?
It was a combination of, yes, I'm a competent guy, and we're going to renew Britain, but with Brexit underlying the problems that Britain has, and the Labour Party were really shy of going all in to renew links with the European Union and improve the economy, which is really at the root of people's disenchantment with politics, I think, at the moment, is that there's a general feeling that things should be better in Britain. And the contrast with when the last big Labour landslide came in 1997 was pretty stark. There was a very strong, almost feeling of national renewal, and things could only get better when Tony Blair swept it to power with just a bigger majority. Keir Starmer, personally, he lacked charisma and was not able to make powerful and convincing arguments on a personal level. But on a political level, I think the British prime ministers are rather hamstrung by not being able to carry out the measures in getting closer to the EU that would dramatically improve the economy, because that would involve taking steps towards what looks like rejoining. You go back into the customs union, you might even go back into the single market, and you'd be members in all but name if you did that.
Well, David,
the economy, every survey would prove.
Let me just interrupt you right there. Keir Starmer, he wanted, as you say, closer ties with Europe, but he did not want to look like he was reversing Brexit. Shouldn't he have just leveled with the public and said, I'm actually, going to do what you're thinking I should do? I mean, honesty is the best policy, or is it not?
Well, what they should have done if they were going to go down that route is said from during the campaign, we're going to explore much closer links or even the possibility of rejoining, if that's the route they wanted to go down. Instead, they've been muddling through by making almost secret inquiries sometimes to Brussels about how about we do this, or how about we rejoin this customs union and see how it goes. And this hasn't been an approach that's worked or convinced anybody, either in Brussels or in Britain. And the problem is that I think we've been discussing that opinions are still very, very divided in Britain. There's a small majority perhaps for rejoining, but it's not been enough for Labour to make it their platform. It's really in their heartland vote anyway. There's no real new votes in it for them. And if they went for it, they might find that there's a backlash against it. It's all part of the mess that's been left in British politics that neither side seems to be able to recover from at the moment. And that's left an opening for the populists on left and right. So the very strong Brexiteers, still led by Nigel Farage, and actually the very strong rejoiners, that's in the Green Party movement, which has picked up the youth vote, very passionate vote for rejoining the EU, has gravitated around this massive rise on the left of the Green Party.
If you were sitting in Brussels tonight, the headquarters of the European Union, how would you read Keir Starmer's resignation?
Well, actually, there will be a lot of shaking of heads and almost "I told you so's" in the various languages of the EU, simply because it has left a very difficult situation. You've got a country like Britain where half of its trade is with the EU, and yet they feel that there's no electoral mandate for repairing the ties of commerce and business that are necessary to get the most out of that trade and to really put the country back and firing all cylinders. So we know that Andy Burnham, the guy in Labour who is likely to become Prime Minister, was a Remainer and would like to rejoin the EU. But again, will he feel that he's got a mandate to go down the route of perhaps going back into the customs union and starting to really revive Britain's links with its nearest neighbours? Because I don't think he's going to get along very well with the latest American regime. He's someone who's been pretty outspoken in his criticism of President Trump, and he's even more in a different political tribe than Keir Starmer was, I think, and being to the left of Keir Starmer.
You're in the United States, so let me ask you, from Washington, does it now look smaller? I mean, the UK used to sell itself as steady, pragmatic, serious, and after 6 prime ministers in 10 years, is that brand, in the eyes of Washington, damaged?
The Americans still want to have Britain as a partner. Part of that appeal was its military and its willingness to carry out operations around the world, often hand in hand with America. But the less that Britain shows its willingness to do that, the more it cuts back on its military footprint, the more impoverished it seems in terms of being a strong ally for America. Obviously, Britain is still regarded with great fondness with all the pageantry that you see during coronations and royal weddings. But you've got to hope that Britain is going to be more than a royal entertainment for the Americans. Right. It's got to be a security, economic, military, and perhaps even cultural partner going forward. This can work, but actually it takes 2 to tango, and the ambivalence of this American administration hasn't helped with the kind of public support that you need to stop and carry and be seen to be a strong ally with America. Where if you've got an administration that's saying we want to annex Greenland, NATO has never helped us out, these are offensive things that have been said about Britain that make it harder for the Brits, the British politicians, to commit to the sort of strong relationship that both sides have had and would, I think many people in both sides would like to see going forward.
Let me ask you a final question. If Andy Burnham, if he becomes the next prime minister, Do you think he will do what the 6 prime ministers before him would not do? Will he say, we need to seriously consider rejoining the EU in some form?
I think that the figures are pretty clear. The British economy is smaller by between 6 and 8%, and that's between around at least £100 billion and maybe as much as £240 billion a year of growth that is absent because of the Brexit vote. And that's me saying that from looking at a lot of neutral research about how the economics turned out. So Andy Burnham has to come in and explain to, if he cannot find a way of improving the British economy without looking more towards the EU, he will end up having to say to Britain, we need closer ties. If what you want is more economic growth, because we know that you don't want mass immigration. Those are messages that have been sent by voters. Mm-hmm. I don't see it happening in this Parliament, but we've got another leading Labour cabinet member called Wes Streeting, who's going to figure prominently in Andy Burnham's government. He could be as Chancellor. He said he would campaign on rejoining the EU. Uh-huh. I do think that feeling is returning to politics, but there has to be a more general explanation and acceptance of the economic harm that's been done, and not only economic, that this is leading to a breakdown of, if you like, of the nations, of the home nations, as we've talked about, but also a societal breakdown. That there isn't enough hope for young people who are flocking to the Green Party because it's offering to rejoin the European Union. Now that is a change over the when we look at who's changing their minds about what their vote was in 2016. I don't think an awful lot of people have actually changed their minds. What we've got is 10 more years of young voters who many, I would say the majority of whom do want to rejoin.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens on the 20th anniversary of Brexit. We'll see if we're talking then, David, if we're talking about a European homecoming for the Brits. Time will tell. David Charter, it's always good to talk with you, good to get your valuable insights on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, what do you think? How have the past 10 years of Brexit affected the UK and the rest of the world? We would love to hear your thoughts. Send us your thoughts, recommendations. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Brent Goff. For all of us here in Berlin, thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.